What's up everybody, this is Ryan here and you're watching sort of a continuation of a video I made earlier. And so the video I made before was basically me kind of giving quite an aggressive sort of call to action. And basically the purpose of the video is I tried to make a video which I would give my younger self being basically a stubborn, egotistical, insecure kid or young adult who had severe issues with interacting with people, especially people who I wasn't familiar with. Like, I was okay interacting with friends, but for the most part, meeting new people was something I didn't like doing, and it was something that just gave me a lot of anxiety. So in that video, what I wanted to emphasize is that if you're kind of in that category, whether or not you're totally like me, if you feel like you have issues with social interaction, I just wanted to emphasize in that video that it is a skill. You should frame it like that, and you should put the time in to improve your skills. So I gave a pretty harsh talk in that video because that's what I find I personally respond to best. But at the same time, I don't always have to be super harsh, and a lot of getting over your insecurities actually comes from not like a harsh dictatorial way of treating yourself, but from a very forgiving sort of frame of reference. So anyways, in this video, I'm not really going to try to be harsh or anything like that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to give you the practicalities and techniques which I used to overcome some of my issues. Now, in particular, if you are an analytical type person, or you just find yourself stuck in your head a lot and you're having difficulty communicating with people as a result, this video is for you. This is one of the most difficult things I've ever had to deal with in my life. And through a lot of years of effort, I've managed to get as far as actually tricking a ton of people into thinking that I'm a really social, easy to communicate with person. Now, I kind of am now, but again, I'm still that analytical nerd from before. So what I want to focus on is how do we kind of fix certain specific issues, and then at the same time just be more comfortable in our own skin. And as we'll see, I would invite you to consider the idea that the way you feel strongly affects your conversations with people. So that's a big thing that we need to work on instead of worrying so much about literal content. Okay, so first of all, if you don't learn anything else from this video, the thing that you need to understand most about human interaction is that it's actually largely based on subcommunication. So for example, instead of just focusing in on the literal content of the words that I'm saying, there's aspects such as like body language, vocal tonality, cadence, inflection, all kinds of things like that, which actually are responsible for the majority of the communication which actually occurs during human interaction. And this is actually also kind of the case when it comes to mammals in general. If you don't learn anything else from this video, you need to understand that human interaction is largely based on subcommunication, which is mostly driven by body language, vocal tonality, inflection, and cadence, as opposed to the words themselves. This is the key to having good interactions with people, instead of awkward and negative interactions. Do you see my point? All right, well, hopefully my little bit of acting there kind of helped to demonstrate the point I was making, is that what I want you to focus on right now is, well, let me put it this way. If you're an analytical person, you're probably trying to focus in on and compute the perfect literal content of what you're trying to say. If I say the perfect thing, then the other person will laugh. And you probably don't even realize that simply by being uptight about the literal content of your words, instead of just like flowing naturally with the conversation, is actually the problem itself. And that's kind of like the worst thing about being an analytical person, is that it's simultaneously the thing that you're used to solving every problem with, but in this particular case, the solution is to kind of just turn the volume down on that particular part of your brain. So if I were to put this into computing terms, because this is kind of a programming channel to a degree, how I would phrase it is like this. When you're talking to another person or just other people, you have your analytical, neurotic monkey mind on the main thread, and then the conversation itself and the subconscious signals that the person is sending to you and all that is operating on a background thread. And so if you're someone like me, you're just used to always analyzing everything. So what we actually need to do is we need to reverse those things. Now, I'm not saying you need to get rid of the analytical part of your brain. You won't, ever. That's never gone away. However, you do need to understand that that thing needs to be basically in the background when you're actually talking to someone, and you need to just learn how to be clear and present to the moment itself, and to kind of just let go of the analytical part. Like I say, don't worry, it'll still be there and you can still use it in the conversation. It's just, as you've probably figured out, you're only able to have like really complicated analytical conversations with analytical people. Most people, I find, don't really fall into that category. Okay, cool. So hopefully that was kind of a decent introduction to what I'm going to be talking about. And the main thing I was trying to do there is to just point you towards particular issues that you might want to look at, and to also understand that, you know, one thing I used to do is I used to constantly worry about what to say. And as I've gotten better and better at communicating with people, I've learned it's a lot more about how you say it. So, you know, just try and, if you're an analytical person, that might be hard for you to understand, but that's really where you need to reframe things. That's where I would suggest you reframe things. So anyways, let's talk some specifics now. So number one, here's what I would suggest to you if you are someone who probably is kind of operating with messed up subcommunication like I was. So number one, you need to start becoming aware of your own subcommunication issues so that you can start to work on them. So this process for you might have to do with asking friends and family, hey, do I have certain things I do that kind of come off as weird or negative? Hopefully you've got people in your life who will give you a good answer on that. Maybe you don't. In any case, try and just do some self-evaluation. For me, I had two particular issues. One of them was more recent, and one of them is an issue I had since I was probably born. So the first issue that I had when interacting with people manifests itself by people who used to always ask me, "Are you okay?" And my response to that would be, "Yeah." In school and places like that, people would ask me, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "Why are you asking me if I'm okay? I'm literally just sitting here not doing anything." So what I didn't understand at the time is that my facial expression was communicating that I really wasn't okay. Now, that's not my fault. It's not my fault that I am related to Eastern European peasants who have thousands of years of oppression ground into face, but that's just the way it is. So what I would suggest to you, or what I had to do, let me phrase it that way, is I needed to learn how to adopt a natural smile. A natural smile is tricky if you're not someone who smiles a lot normally. This guy. And the reason why is, in order to do a proper natural smile and not come off as weird and incongruent like this, you need to actually change the muscles around your eyes, and you need to like relax your face. And again, my natural face is like rigid and stony and whatever. So what I would suggest you do is you need to Look into body language, try to find people who have these characteristic traits, try to talk to them, be around people who do smile, and just kind of, not deliberately, but subconsciously almost, just notice how they kind of smile. And you have to fake it until you make it. So when I started my job as a salesman, I was very poor at smiling, and that was very off-putting to people. And then after about 2 years of faking it, I got to the point where if I look at a customer, a natural smile instantly subconsciously gets plastered on my face. Now, I don't think I can do that for you when I'm just looking at a webcam. I will try. That's about as good as I can do. I'm not a big smiler, but even just a calm... I notice I'm relaxing my face. So try to, basically, to wrap this up, try to figure out how to have a natural smile, practice it, and then when you meet new people, just practice having a smile on your face when you do it, and that will improve things drastically. The other thing I had to do, which also had to do with my facial expression, is I noticed pretty quickly that as I started to become kind of a bigger guy, I'm not huge, I'm about, 183 centimeters, and I lift a few weights, but I'm not that big. Anyways, I started to notice that I was kind of intimidating people, people who are smaller than me and kids and stuff like that. And it really bugged me because I never want to scare or intimidate anyone deliberately. Unless they mess with me, then I'm pretty good at that game. But what I realized is that my natural expression was kind of intimidating to people sometimes, if it wasn't just unfriendly. So another thing that I figured out, and this is something I discovered more recently, is so the way that you demonstrate that you are not a threat to another human being is you actually raise your eyebrows. Just like this. Hi. So imagine like the difference between, hello, welcome, my name is Ryan, versus like I'll do like a stereotypical, hi, my name's Ryan and I'm from North America and I'm from Oregon. I'm not actually from Oregon, but I was just trying to portray a stereotypical kind of chipper white guy. And there's a lot of them in Oregon, I'm told. Anyways, so point being, if you're talking to kids or you're particularly concerned about intimidating someone, which I don't know if this will be an issue for you, but this has been an issue for me lately, when you're introducing someone, it's like, hi, what's up? My name is Ryan. Instead of like the, hey, how's it going? Because I can kind of have a bit of a predatory stare, it's called. And you kind of don't want to do that with people you meet, even if you're not really intending to scare them. So yeah, that basically wraps up issue number 1. So start to become aware of your own sort of facial and physical subcommunications and try to identify the ones you're particularly poor at. If you do that, you'll immediately start to notice that you have an easier time meeting new people. Because if you approach someone with a friendly expression, they're more likely to respond to you in a friendly way. If you approach someone with a serious negative expression, which unfortunately might be your natural one, you're going to probably get more negative experiences, simply put. Okay, so issue number 2 actually kind of includes issue number 1 collectively. But basically issue number 2 is that when I was having conversations with people before, my whole physiology and therefore by extension subcommunication was often a reflection of what was going on in my head and just issues I was dealing with in life, including the frustration of trying to talk to people. The result of that is that sometimes I'd even be having a conversation with someone that I quite enjoyed, but I was subconsciously telling them through subcommunication that they were making me feel uncomfortable, or just I am uncomfortable right now. And the problem is that changes the way people interact with you and creates a negative feedback loop. So basically what I mean by this is I was accidentally kind of putting people off with my body language. And then by default, I was getting worse interactions from people. I interpreted that to basically mean people are mostly mean and hard to interact with, when in reality, if you can actually change your subcommunication, then most people, when you just talk to them out of the blue, if your subcommunication is natural and not messed up, the conversation will usually go fine. Most people actually are pretty easy to talk to if you get that particular part right. Okay, so how do you subconsciously stop telling people that you're talking to that they are making you feel uncomfortable simply by the fact that they are talking to you, which really is that's the biggest issue we've got to deal with here. You're not going to like this answer, and it's going to take a long time to actually develop this skill, but here's what you need to do. You need to stop caring whether the conversation goes well or not. You actually need to stop simulating conversations ahead of time and then creating these weird expectations about how things are going to go. And the reason why you need to not do that, or you need to not hold on to them too tightly, is because guess what? I'm sure you've had the experience of a conversation that you thought was going to go really well and it went really poorly. And I'm sure you've also had experiences where you thought a conversation was going to go poorly and it actually went really well. So a particular case for the latter, I remember one of the first times I put in notice at a job. Put in notice means to quit. I am leaving in 2 weeks. I was petrified and embarrassed and just really terrified about the whole thing. And I thought it was going to be really bad. And then when I actually sat down and just said to my boss, hey, I need to leave for school, I'm putting in 2 weeks notice, my boss at the time was like, okay, I understand. And so that was a huge learning experience for me, because it kind of taught me, okay, I just created all of this anxiety around something which didn't even happen the way I expected it to. So the secret here is that you can still use your analytical mind to kind of predict certain possible outcomes. The problem is if you actually think you know how the conversation is going to go ahead of time, that's going to ruin your communication from being natural and not awkward and carefree. Because the problem is if you plan ahead of time and it doesn't go to plan, guess what? You're going to be lost, and your analytical mind is going to shit itself because it doesn't know what to do. So that's kind of the main topic here. Now, this is really hard to do in practice because we kind of have these natural tendencies or natural behaviors when we make a social faux pas, it's called, a social error. So suppose, for example, that you tell a joke to an entire room of people and nobody laughs. I'm sure we've all had similar situations. Actually, probably every human being has had that particular situation occur in their life, no matter how funny they are. So the thing is, what I'm trying to advocate you do here, what I would try to, if I were to try and point to what you need to do, which is very difficult because it's not really an analytical thing anymore. When that moment happens, you tell the joke or you say something to some person and it just goes wrong. You don't get the expected reaction. When that happens, you need to not let it bother you. So normally if I told the joke and the whole room wasn't laughing, all of a sudden I'd be like, oh no, I'm not funny. Everyone thinks I'm not funny. What am I going to do? My whole life is ruined because one joke didn't go over well. Obviously, that's not the case. Everyone has awkward situations. It's just that if you want to become someone who looks like they don't have awkward interactions, then what you need to actually do is you just need to stop caring. So I had that situation on Sunday night. I was over for a Thanksgiving dinner with my brother and a bunch of his friends and a bunch of my friends, and it was absolutely wonderful. And out of the 10 jokes I told that night, One of them went over really poorly. Like, no one laughed at it. And instead of like freaking out about it, I just kind of didn't really care. And then in like a minute later, the conversation had moved on, and everyone, including me up until now, forgot about the fact that there was an awkward interaction there. So really what I'm saying here is stop trying to be perfect, because no one is, and you will never be perfect. You'll never have perfect communication with people. And when it does go wrong, don't actually let it bother you. And the reason why it shouldn't bother you is because it's only a big deal because you're making it a problem. You are making your awkwardness a problem, and that is making you more awkward. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a bit of a mind fuck, pardon my language, but this really is the key to having natural conversations with people. Don't try to simulate it ahead of time and be comfortable with whatever happens. Be comfortable being your nerdy and analytical self, because that's probably not going to change. Okay, so hopefully I've kind of identified what you need to do, but I'm fully aware of the fact that in issue number 2, when I was talking about it, I didn't really tell you specific things you can do to improve the situation. I gave you like a general idea of what to do. The reason I did that is that I don't know what you need to do to fix you exactly, but what I will leave this video on is the technique that I used to basically emulate other people in order to subconsciously adopt better subcommunication. So what I want you to do is I want you to pick someone, maybe a YouTube person who you watch a lot. I wouldn't pick me unless you want to, but pick someone who has good subcommunication for a particular thing that you're trying to do. And what you want to do is you want to kind of watch that person before you have a social engagement. So what do I mean by this? I actually employ this technique all of the time when I make videos. This is actually me giving you a super incredible secret here. Okay, so what's an example? For this particular video, what I'm really trying to focus on is actually an old mentor which I had a long time ago by the name of none other than Elliot Hulse. And the thing about Elliot Hulse is that he had this way of describing things, and his body language was just super loose and free when he's answering questions, and his words are just flowing. And one of the things that I'm going to do is, if that's the particular sort of subcommunication that I want to adopt, which obviously I can't do it as well as Elliot, I'm going to watch Elliot's videos sometimes before I record one of my videos. Now, I didn't actually do that today, and I'm just giving you one example. I don't actually really watch Elliot Hulse too much anymore, but he's a great example of someone who has impeccable subcommunication. So to give another example, suppose, for example, that I'm about to explain something super, super complicated. So let's pretend for a moment that I'm trying to explain to you the difficulties of communicating shared state across multiple different processes and ensuring that there are no race conditions presented. So if I'm going to be explaining a topic which is very technical and quite difficult to explain, then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to adopt Sean Carroll's speech pattern, and Sean Carroll explains very complicated ideas in a very easy to understand way. And how he does that is through inflection in what he's saying towards the end of the sentence. So do you see what I'm doing there? So what I'm trying to tell you here is, if you want to kind of improve your subcommunication, or you don't even know where to start, watch people. Watch their subcommunication. Do what they do. If I want to be Elliot Hulse, I'm going to like move around and make sure that my physiology is relaxed. I'm sticking my chest out and I'm talking from my chest or something like that. Whereas if I'm not particularly concerned about doing something like that, then maybe I might adopt more of like I might watch Sean Carroll, like I say, who's a physicist. He's not a weightlifter. So all I'm trying to say to you here is find models that you can use to base your subcommunication off of. If you know you're about to be social, maybe watch that model, watch their videos, kind of play around with their subcommunication. And if you need to, do lots of stretches, fix your posture. If your posture is like this, then you're not going to have an easy time communicating. If your posture, if your gut's sucked in and your shoulders are back, then you're going to be kind of communicating as sort of a more powerful, intense kind of speaker. So figure out what you need to change about you, and then use these role models to base those changes off of. And humans have these things called mirror neurons, which will allow you to do that pretty well. That's it for this video. Let's roll to the outro. If you have questions about Android, Kotlin, software architecture, or just programming in general, then leave me a question down below and I might just get back to you in the next video. If you enjoyed this content, do me a favor and hit the like button down below. Consider subscribing, following me on your preferred social media platforms, and even throwing me a couple bucks on PayPal or Patreon. Links in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and peace out.